much. It's very kind. And the topic today, the title is domestic drones and national security, but I'm going to already deviate from the script and say drones are really global, right? Like, so there's only really when you look at, and we're going to have a slide here in a minute. There's a lot of drone companies globally. The real title, I think, is commercial off-the-shelf COTS drones and national security. Because that's, I think, the real issue that is happening today. So prolific, they're everywhere, and what do we do about them? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to give you an overview of what's out there in terms of drones, talk a little bit about the threat posture, technological solutions to address that threat, including remote identification. It's a rule that the FAA put out a couple years ago, and tell you whether or not that is actually a solution. So there's a hint there. Some of the challenges, and there's a bunch of legal policy updates we're going to go through. All right, so drones. Words matter, right? And when people think drones, they think of flying things in the air. Guess what? There's a lot of drones. Let's just call them UXS, uncrewed vehicles. So uncrewed aircraft systems are the ones that are flying around. Then you have your uncrewed surface vehicles. You have uncrewed subsurface vehicles. And now you've probably seen them, the spot dogs, right? The quadruped UGVs, uncrewed ground vehicles. Those robotic dogs without heads that are a little freakish looking. Okay, so lots of uncrewed systems out there that we need to address. And guess what? Billion-dollar efforts. So you see some of the numbers here. I'm not going to read them to you. The other thing I want to highlight as well are flying taxis or electric vertical takeoff and landing, eVTOL aircraft. Another emerging technology that you're going to see more and more on the battlefield and in domestic airspace. And how do we deal with all of these? And what are the threats that we face because of them? You know, look, I'm a big proponent of the positive societal impacts that these systems can have, but with every technology, there is a dark side. So I'm going to take you a little bit there today, because when you think about national security, those are the things we need to think about. All right, here's an example, and this is really busy. It's an eye chart. This does not even scratch the surface of the different kinds of drone hardware that are out there today. So you've got fixed wing, you've got the VTOL, again, vertical takeoff landing wing, lighter than air, some for agriculture. Drone in a box, these things pop out autonomously and do pre-programmed missions, just like for agriculture or long line linear inspections and things like that. So this gives you a good visual of only some companies that are out there in this space. So again, when you think about drones and what's out there, here are some of the flying ones. All right, so let's talk about the threat. I literally I ripped these out of the headlines. This is recent stuff. Unless you've been not looking at the news at all for the last 2 months, hopefully some of these are very familiar. So we know what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and people are calling this the first real drone war. Okay, that's significant from a national security standpoint, because if it can happen there, it can happen here. Okay? I'm going to say something, and I want you to let this sink in. Jordan Tower 22. First time in the last 70 years that we've had ground troops killed from the air. 70 years. That was a drone. Okay? Think about that for a second. All right? Now, we always think about the physical threat, people getting blown up, equipment, buildings. There's a cyber threat involved in this too. Why? Drones are essentially flying computers. And so there's been a lot of talk, and I'm really looking forward to Dean Cheng's talk again later about China, but Chinese drones in particular. So when you looked at that slide, guess what? About 80+% of the commercial off-the-shelf drone market is Chinese. okay? And we're going to talk about some of the laws that have cropped up and some of the concerns that raises, but it's a cyber threat. It's a cyber concern. And let's see, what else? Yeah, so I'll move on, but you can read the headlines, and I'm sure you have. So once again, you see that this threat that, you know, General Poss, James Poss, he was our A2, which is the second highest in the intelligence community for the Air Force before he retired, friends with General Dunlap. You know, I love this quote that he says often. He says, you know, what we train for is the threat that's going to come across the hemisphere. What we need to train for is the threat that's going to come across the parking lot. Are you scared yet? Okay, so I know it's right before lunch. I'm trying to keep you guys fired up. All right, so technical solutions. There, you know, are there technical solutions out there? Sure, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the limitations of these. But they even have drones that like can throw a net basically and capture the other drone. There's lasers. There's a good old-fashioned shotgun. You know, there's microwaves. There's all kinds of ways you can possibly mitigate or take out this drone threat. Some work better than others. I gave you guys this citation because this is, I believe, DHS put out a really awesome guide that walks through all the different counter-drone technologies. So I commend that to your attention, and I think people will have these slides afterwards. Okay, or you can go rewatch the video because you're going to want to anyway. So there you go. It's a great technology guide, and it's, even though it's 2019, it's still pretty accurate. All right, so I want to talk about remote identification. What is this rule that the FAA put out? Why did they put it out? Is this actually a technological solution for, let's call it counter-drone? I'm going to focus on drones, okay? Remote identification is a rule the FAA put out a couple years ago because basically Congress told them to. With all the drones that are going to be integrated into the national airspace, that's the projection, you know, you needed a way to determine, okay, who are these people, like who flying these things? So essentially it's like what the FAA refers to as a digital license plate in the sky, all right? So from a broadcast standpoint, there's either going to be baked into the drone or a module you put on the drone that will broadcast the drone's velocity, location, again, depends on if it's a module or in the drone itself, you know, the location of the operator or where it took off from, you know, basically the registration number, serial number, things like this, okay? The interesting thing about this rule is that the public is supposed to have access to all this information too. So theoretically, you should be able to have an app soon where you can, and actually there are a few out there, you can Google remote ID apps right now and you can find some, where you can just look up, put it up in the sky if you see a drone, and it should give you the publicly accessible information. Now, for law enforcement and folks like the CIA, right, our security agencies, they're going to be able to triangulate that information with what's in the FAA registration database. That's the whole point of this thing, all right? So that's great. So anybody just off the top think of what the limitations of this thing are? Just off the top. You have, go ahead, please. You don't have to do it. You think a bad guy is actually going to like have a module? No, of course not. So there's that, right? The technology is really behind. So the manufacturers were supposed to comply in 2022, September 2022. Of course, none of them did that at the time. The FAA gave them a grace period till December. And then the remote pilots, the drone pilots, were supposed to be flying these things officially as of September of last year. Guess what? All the remote ID module providers, they ran out of hardware. They couldn't make them in time. So now the deadline has been pushed to next month of 2024 for remote pilot compliance with this rule. So, you know, law enforcement, they don't have the money to buy this equipment. They don't have it. So this is going to be, and we're going to talk also about law enforcement and some of the limitations on their authorities. Even if they found a drone, what can they do with it? Hold on, you'll hear in a second. All right, so this is a primer. It's a white paper I wrote. If you want to learn more about this rule, I'm going to move on. All right, what are some of the challenges other than maybe we just don't have the equipment? Okay, so dark drones. Dark drones are drones that don't emit RF frequency. And so when you think about those first-person view, you know, the guys with the goggles doing the racing drones, yeah, that's a perfect example of a dark drone. And you see these being used actually in Ukraine. You know, they're strapping grenades to these things, dropping them into tanks. You've probably seen some of the videos, pretty cool. But if you're trying to detect a drone coming at you and it's not emitting an RF signal, that's going to be kind of hard. So how's technology solving this problem? I was just at the Air and Space Force Association's Warfare Symposium last week, a whole panel of people talking about, this is a wicked hard problem. Like literally the conclusion of the panel, this is a wicked hard problem. Like I just wrote an article about it, actually right there. So for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine, so you can read about what the panel had to say, but that's their bottom line. AI swarms, okay, so this is coming to possibly a city near you, where this not, you don't just worry about the one drone coming across the parking lot. How about a big swarm of them? What movie was that with Morgan Freeman where he's the president?
Star Trek had it.
Star Trek had it. What was the movie where Morgan Freeman was the president and he's on the boat in the middle of the lake?
Angel Has Fallen.
Angel Has Fallen, yeah. And all of a sudden the swarm's coming at him and they're diving into the lake. That could actually happen. Like that's like, you know, Hollywood isn't far off, sadly, you know, in some of these respects. So AR swarms that are going to learn from each other. The ones in the back are going to learn from the ones in the front. That's going to get real interesting. And how do you address that? How do you detect it? How do you identify it? Once you detect it, is it a good or a bad? You know, are these good or bad guys? And then, you know, how do you mitigate it? By the way, swarms. It sounds horrible. It's like it's a term that scares people. But when you think about the good uses of drones and swarms, think about multispectral cameras that could be used in agriculture. Pretty amazing use for a swarm of drones flying over a field. But what you don't want them is, you know, flying over a baseball field, you know, harassing kids. All right. So identify friend or foe, IFF. So this is a real technology that's been around for a really long time and used on crewed aircraft for the military. Okay, so it's like, it's a transponder, basically. It's encrypted, and so if you have this capability, you can determine if that's a friendly or not, whatever is coming at you, because it's going to be squawking, essentially. Well, guess what? We actually have IFF transponders that are size of a deck of cards now and can go on drones. Guess who isn't buying them? The military. So it was crazy to me because I'm listening to this panel last week and they're like, oh, this is really hard. You know, Jordan, Tower 22, how would we know? And I'm thinking IFF, it's like that simple. And by the way, there are companies making this. So there's one really good answer, IFF. Let's put it on our small drones and the ones of our coalition partners, and at least we know if it's us. You know, if it's not, and I'm on the battlefield, right? Take it out. Why would you wait? And last but not least, there really is no one size fits all. Even if you had IFF, right? You still, you know, there might be a scenario where a laser maybe isn't your best option, depending on where you are. You know, if you're in an urban environment. Obviously. So that is the big challenge too, is that you really have to craft your solution for the situation you're in, and it's going to be dynamic. This picture here is actually an SAIC vehicle that is equipped with all kinds of sensors and things like this. You know, that's pretty complex. You know, that's not going to be the perfect solution for everybody, but it is one, and obviously the military works with that one. All right. So, and like I said, there are downsides to this technology. This chart actually came, which I'm going to give you a site for here in a minute. The counter UAS, essentially, that's my shorthand for it, the counter UAS uncrewed aircraft system, ARC, Aviation Rulemaking Committee report. And so these guys, a group of industry experts and government experts got together and gave the FAA some recommendations for future rulemaking. That's what that was about. But this is a chart from there. I thought it was excellent because it had some of those mitigation systems, meaning how do you take it out? What do you do about that drone when you know about it? How accurate it is, how efficient it is, will it introduce risk? And notice there's a yes for all of these. And, so when you think about domestic airspace versus on the battlefield, you can see why the FAA is really wringing their hands over how do we address these threats in the national airspace system? How do we deploy this technology at airports? By the way, pilots, commercial aircraft, how many people flew in here? I know I did. Okay. There's over 100 sightings or reports from pilots every single week of drones in the airspace. Like, that's frightening, right? Because, if you think a bird can get sucked into an engine, what can a drone do to a crewed aircraft? So around airports, drones can be a real problem. And so that's a real big area also domestically that needs a solution. All right. So what are the challenges besides the technical challenges? There are legal challenges. I'm not going to go through them all, but this right here, this interagency memo is the memo you want to read because it goes through all the different laws that were written many years ago and never intended to apply to counter-drone technology, but do. And they're criminal laws, things like the wiretap statute, Pen Register Act, the list goes on and on. Very, very well outlined here. But a lot of these detection and mitigation technologies run afoul of those statutes, which is why Congress actually gave the Department of Defense affirmative authority. DoD was the first ones to get this in 10 USC 130I. That allows the Department of Defense to detect and mitigate drone threats wherever, and there's specific requirements covered, facilities and things like this. I'm not going to get into all the nuances. You got to read the law. That's a good tip for law students. Make sure you read the law, okay? But 1030I, the next group that got it was the DOJ, Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security. DHS is huge. Not every facet of DHS has the authority to do counter-drone. And guess what? TSA, that governs airport protection, they don't have it. Surprise. And that authority keeps expiring, and we'll talk about that in a second. But lots of legal challenges. Here's the big one, everybody. Homeland Security 101. If you got a pen, take a note. Who is the first to respond when there's an incident domestically? Who shows up? Is it the military? No, it's the police. It's the fire. It's public safety. It's emergency response. Okay? Guess who doesn't have authority to do counter-drone? Yeah, the police. Okay? So this is a problem. And last year there were a number of proposals, legislative proposals that went nowhere, that gave basically a pilot program for 12 police agencies a year to work with the DOJ and DHS, get trained by them to mitigate, not only learn how to detect, but to actually mitigate the drone threat. And those laws went nowhere. Nowhere. That should worry you, because from a Homeland Security I'm not saying every Sheriff Billy Bob should have that authority, and certainly you need a process, right? But I'm thinking the SWAT teams, they're highly trained. Makes sense that those might be the folks that could take this thing out if something's going down, and instead of waiting around for, I don't know, maybe DHS to show up. So big challenges. So I'm going to switch now to some of the policy updates. Chinese drones, this is something that is like, this raises the blood pressure of people in the drone community. This is a world I live in every day now on the commercial side. And there's look, they're cheap and they're pretty awesome. The sensors are good, so guess who's the primary user of DJI drones? They're the Chinese ones. Well, besides Autel and others, but DJI is the big one. Law enforcement. And they love them. And they will be the first to go in front of Congress and say, we need them. Okay, think about that for a second. If you're a foreign power and you want to know what happens in a Homeland Security incident, that kind of information of the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures that every single law enforcement person is using across the country, that would be some pretty great intel. Man, they're smart. So that's what's happening. So in the fiscal year 20 National Defense Authorization Act, it's not up here, Section 848, Congress told the Department of Defense, you will not buy or operate Chinese drones. Okay, that was a couple years ago. There were some bans, right, policy bans before that. Well, this just came out. This now extends to all the federal agencies. And it's the American Drone Security Act. Now, you can Google this thing, and you are going to find a lot of articles with pilots and other people advocating to repeal this thing. That it's killing them, that, this is horrible, this is, that makes no sense, there's no real threat. But Congress thinks there is. And by the way, this is bipartisan, okay? So this is what I keep telling people is all right, when both sides of the aisle can agree on nothing but this one thing, it might tell you something, right? So anyway, we're the government, we're here to help. I know how it is. Anyway, this is the new law, and you can see it's operation, it's procurement. There's a lot of nuances in it. So I commend you to always go to the original source and read it. Don't just read the articles. Go to the actual law, read what it says. But this is significant. And some of the states are adopting similar provisions, like Florida last year adopted this thing as well, something very similar. So Florida state agencies cannot operate Chinese drones. So there you have it. All right, let's talk about the FAA Reauthorization Act. So this is still bubbling. It's not finalized. There are two helpful sections. Like I said, this counter-UAS authority for the DOJ and DHS expired 2 years ago. They keep extending it. So these two sections basically, the first section, 814, will extend that authority. Yay. Okay. Why this is not permanent, I don't know. Why they keep sunsetting it. And then section 815 gives the FAA 5 more years to do more testing at airports, 5 airports on counter-drone technology. Okay, think about that for a second. They've been doing it for 5 years already. They get 5 more years. So 10 years of doing testing to see how's it going. So that should make you worry. You asked our last amazing speaker what keeps her up at night. This keeps me up at night. No, seriously, because this is a real threat, and I don't know that people fully appreciate the extent of this threat. And I just feel like almost historically, Congress, it takes something really horrible to happen, like, for example, Hurricane Katrina, right, for them to reorganize FEMA. It will take a horrific drone attack or incident on domestic soil for them to take this seriously. I mean, we've been massaging and admiring this problem since 2015 when a drone landed on the White House lawn. Think about that, January 2015. And here we are today oh, the technology's still a wicked problem. Oh, we don't have legal authorities for our law enforcement and Homeland Security responders. It's wow, okay. So let's just keep holding our breath and hope it's going to be all right, because that's a good way to live. Aiken Gump, by the way, did a really great summary of all the different provisions in the FAA reauthorization. If you're an aviation buff, lots of different provisions there. I just took out the two that were kind of counter UAS focused. All right, and last but not least, like I said, this aviation rulemaking committee, the FAA has the authority to do this. They gather people together, give them a charter, say, study this problem and give us recommendations that might, inform our rulemaking. So that makes you think, all right, maybe they're going to do some kind of a rule on counter UAS sometime soon. Probably not. It's 119 pages, this paper. It's interesting. But I pulled out the high-level bullets because really this is all very high-level, 30,000-foot view, like, hey, it's important to, talk to people before you make a rule. Like, that's the kind of stuff in this report. So it doesn't get super granular, but there's interesting things in here. They're basically saying, look, consider detection and mitigation separately. Don't lump them together all the time, because there might be people that just need to detect things and somebody else can mitigate it for them. So the mitigation thing is the one that it worries people, because, will you take out all the pacemakers in the area so if you could just let people detect and not make that illegal anymore, at least there's that, and again, remote ID isn't quite the answer. Hey, there should be training on this stuff, safety programs. You can see where I'm going with this. So it's 119 pages, a lot of fluff there. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but let's put it this way. The FAA actually got an ARC report in 2021 for this thing called Beyond Visual Line of Sight for drones. Okay, so right now, Part 107 is the commercial rule. It requires pilots to keep that drone within their visual line of sight. Okay, think about delivering for Walmart. How's that working out? It's not working out real well. Drone Up's got this cherry picker thing. They've got a pilot in the sky, and they've got to keep that thing within a mile of the drone so they can see when they're delivering the rotisserie chicken. I mean, that's where we are right now, okay? 2021, that report was given to the FAA, and to this day, there is no BVLOS, Beyond Visual Line of Sight rule. And when I asked somebody just before I came here, where's it going? Where are we on this? The answer was, oh, it's an election year. There's no way the FAA is touching a rule this year. Okay, so you can hold your breath for a counter UAS rule. We haven't gotten to beyond visual line of sight yet. So that's kind of where we are as an industry. But people are still flying drones, and they're flying them frequently in the national airspace system. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I think there's a lot of time for questions. I could talk all day long, but I'm not going to. I do want to just throw up super quick, and these little cards are out there. This is blurry, I apologize. This is my newsletter. If you have interest in drones or emerging technologies, sign up for it. It comes in your inbox every Tuesday. Fun stuff. And then this is also my educational event that I run called Law Tech Connect. The next one's going to be in San Diego, California. I have the information here, but it's all on my website. So I'll leave it at that. And do you want me to leave that up, or I can just change it?
Well, let's thank you very much, Don. I can see on the faces of some of the Lens scholars that they have questions. Sydney, you look like you have a question.
Spoken to one of these before, so despite its obvious benefits that you mentioned, other than the money, what is being weighed with and eventually outweighing those benefits that's stopping them from purchasing?
I have no idea. I mean, to me it's like it's such a no-brainer just to require this and make everybody purchase it. I have no idea why that is not happening ubiquitously across the United States and all of our coalition partners.
To follow up on that, Don, is there no amateur drone community that doesn't want any regulation?
Is there an amateur drone community? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I had it up on the slide. I didn't really talk about race day quads. So when the remote ID rule came out, Race Day Quads is a company out of Florida. They sell the FPV, the first person view drone stuff, basically. They sued the FAA and challenged the remote ID rule kind of on their own behalf, but as kind of advocates for the entire FPV community, because these are really, really small, very, very fast drones. If you put a heavy module on there, which they are right now, right? Like, you can't fly that thing. So, you know, if you don't have a remote ID capability on your drone, then you're relegated to flying in what they're calling a FRIA, a federally recognized identification area. So think about like an AMA, American, you know, Modeling Association, Model Aircraft Association, like little park. That's where you would have to fly it, and that's it. And the FAA was really slow in implementing what are the rules for FRIAs, how are they approved. You can go on the FAA website and find a list of where they are right now. But look, these guys like ripping around like in the forest and like all over the place, and they can't. So yeah, a lot of people weren't super happy with the remote ID rule.
Sir.
Ma'am, in terms of the hesitance of the Department of Defense to buy the Chinese.
And who are you?
I'm sorry, my name is David Mendelson.
I think you're going to hear from him a little later. But I kind of know who he is, but I want you to know who he is.
Ma'am, I've heard a lot of hesitancy in buying them just due to the fact that there is the potentiality for the Chinese to be able to get into the system and then have it work for its benefit rather than the military's benefit. Do you share that concern at all?
All right. So, you know, I made that joke about, hey, we're the government, we're here to help. I think the reason why people are question the validity of the cyber concerns is because there's been really no transparency on it. You know, really, what is the exact threat? Now, you know as well as I do, you know, the government's not going to open that top secret playbook and say, here's the real threat, here's why. Look, I just saw a notice from the U.S. Coast Guard as I was, you know, scanning through stuff this morning where, you know, they're like, we can't really talk about it because it's classified, but if you have Chinese cranes in your ports, you're going to want to stop using them, give us a call. Like, it literally came out this morning. So you think about that and you're thinking, what, a crane? You know, so think about a drone, right? Because what are drones being used for usually, right? It's the sensors collecting that information. And is that information going back to China or not? I would like to have some faith in our government to think that this is not just an economic play, that this is real, that there's a real threat. And the fact that it's bipartisan, to me, screams that, like, okay, we're all agreeing on this thing. I think there is a real concern.
I kind of wonder if we make cranes in this country anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I know the cranes have similar software.
Yeah, I think it's the
same issue.
Right. Yeah.
Brian.
Thanks, Charlie. Brian Cox, I'm a professor at Cornell Law School and also a retired U.S. Army JAG. I want to ask a question about current TTPs. But before I do, I just want to make just a note that your work is really phenomenal. There's not a whole lot of professional space for keeping us up to date on all things drone. And so this is not a paid advertisement for P3 Tech Consulting. But your website has a section of articles, so if somebody doesn't sign up for your newsletter, at least bookmarking that page is really, I do, and I check it regularly. So,
other than the Lawfire blog.
I'm also, of course,
which she's written.
Yeah, and I'm going to write one on this.
I'm of course signed up for the Lawfire as well. For the question on TTPs, are you staying up to date? Like, are you actively engaged in like monitoring conflicts like, you know, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Hamas, and Gaza? Yep. Like, have you been kind of tied in for those conflicts to identify TTPs that will be useful for us, you know, in conflict, but also in the domestic setting as well? Like, have you been tied in for that very much?
Yeah, absolutely. And the crazy thing is that a lot of commercial companies have been dragged in, right? Because like commercial drones are being used right? This is the first conflict where outside of the DoD channels, these commercial manufacturers are working with nonprofits to put these tools into hands of warfighters, essentially. Some of them going to the front lines or close to it, like in Poland, and training, Ukrainian forces. Like, think about that from a law of war standpoint. I know your head's exploding. But, it's like, do you guys realize, like, this is kind of a big deal? There's actually a lot of people on the commercial drone side that are, like, knee-deep in this stuff. Not always for humanitarian purposes. Some are, they're strapping grenades to them and whatever else. We're seeing a lot out there. All domains, not just air, uncrewed.
I think we might have time for one more question. Well, was there somebody back there last time? Okay, we'll do two questions. We'll do Bryce's, then we're going to...
And I'll answer them quickly.
Hopefully mine allows for that.
Okay. If not, I live 10 minutes from here where you go to school. So.
Fair. My name is Cadet First Class Bryce Hagan, and my question focuses more on a different domain. Namely, in Ukraine, we've seen sort of these underwater submersibles being used to take down what are large ships.
Yep.
So how do you sort of see that playing into the future of warfare? Like, we similarly have large ships, and these tiny drones may be able to take them out.
Yeah, so detection capabilities for all domains is going to be key. And not only that, but like the threat's going to be networked. Or better yet, it's going to be underwater. It's going to pop up, fly through the air, and land some stuff onto the deck too. So that stuff is actually happening. That technology exists.
One more question.
Yes, my question was about making sure the mic going around.
Hang on.
My question was about you and
Hang on.
Ha 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 ha.
You spoke about some of the flaws with using remote IDs, saying that they were heavy and weighed down drones as of now. If we were to advance this technology and create lighter weights, we still have the issue of the bad guys not actually having to use these technologies. So how do we mitigate this issue? Well, how do we enforce remote IDs being used so that we can detect good and bad guys?
Right. And just realize, like, it could be a good guy that inadvertently flies, for example, in airspace where they shouldn't be. So, remote ID doesn't tell you that. Like, and that will always be the challenge. Like, all it can tell you is there's a drone here, either it should or should not be here, and then you always have to figure out that intent, whether you're domestic or on the battlefield. So that's where, as a lawyer or somebody advising, whether it's law enforcement, they eventually get authority, or you're on the battlefield, you just have to, make that call. And what's the risk? In other words, if I take it out and it's a media drone, I get sued, how much money am I going to pay? Is it worth it? Because if it's not a media drone, then what's the risk to the people that, that could be impacted? So there's no, like I said, it's for sure, even if they perfect it, it's not a perfect solution.
Well, thank you very much, Dawn. And Dawn's going to be around, I think, the whole rest of the conference. So please, interface with her, and this is your opportunity. We're going to live large in this break. We're going to go a full 10 minutes. So enjoy it. We'll see you back in 10 minutes.